Let me ask you about the 2020 election. And my question touches on some of what you've already raised, which is that so many, especially foreign policy agendas, are bipartisan, blind support for Israel. And I think in trying to, you know, talk to people about the message that you've been promoting for many years now, not just in this election, that the task on a single day, which is all it takes to vote, is to defeat the worst possible outcome. So in this case, voting for Biden and against Trump. But one obstacle to, I think, convincing many progressives, or at least the ones that I know, of that argument is that they see so much convergence when it comes to foreign policy. So, for example, Obama and Biden gave us the war on Libya, the proxy war in Syria. It's true that they gave us the nuclear deal with Iran, but before that, they gave us the murderous sanctions on Iran that Trump has since reimposed. So, from the point of view of so many of these policies being bipartisan, how could a Biden administration be an improvement?
We're faced with a situation in which we have a Democratic Party candidate who has a very ugly history. You've just given some of the major examples, but is moving significantly to the left, and not because it's his choice, but because of the constant activism and pressure, partly from the Sanders campaign, partly from other activist campaigns. It is an administration which is, you look at the party program, to the left of any preceding Democratic Party program, susceptible to pressure. And that pressure can continue. It can move it further. And we're back to the point about that Eric Loomis made that I described earlier. We had the alternative as a Trump administration, which is rock solid, opposed to, and will totally block any possible popular pressure to the left. Okay. Furthermore, and overwhelmingly significant, the Trump administration is dedicated to the destruction of human society on Earth within a short time. That is the precise meaning of of his environmental policies. Okay, I want to mince words. That's exactly what they mean. That's absolutely not true of anything on the Democratic side. Not great by any means, but nowhere near that. In fact, much more in tune with the more the better parts of the world on this. Now, that's an enormous difference. Another enormous difference is things like the dedication of the perfect willingness of the Trump administration to carry out almost any crime you can think of to advance electoral prospects. You want to kill a lot of people in Africa by killing the World Health Organization, fine, do that. You want to toss children in concentration camps on the border, do that. Whatever you think of. Furthermore, the stuff in the judiciary is an overwhelmingly significant fact. That means everything's killed for a generation, at least. Okay, that's the McConnell strategy. Goes back before Trump, and this is combined with efforts of the Republican governors to try to block voting. This is enormous. Georgia and Florida, efforts in Wisconsin, is to kick out African Americans, disenfranchise them, so you can maintain minority popular rule. That's going to intensify with the blessing of the Supreme Court, the most reactionary court in living memory. Dismantling the Voting Rights Act was a gift to those who want to destroy the democratic process, whatever such as it is. These are huge differences. Yes, there are commonalities, on some points. But we have two parties, one of which can be influenced, the other which not. And I should say the Trump administration is unlike earlier Republican administrations in this respect. So Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan were demonstrably influenced by mass popular protests. That's not going to happen with Trump. This is psychopathic megalomania of a different kind. Furthermore, he surrounded himself with sycophants and cowards who are just going to, shine his shoes and repeat it. This is something unique in political history. It's not just an ordinary right-wing reactionary administration. And so we really have, I think, a very sharp choice at this point. May not like either of them, but that's the world we live in. We can't pretend we live in another world. We can go on changing it. You don't stop just because elections are coming. I mean, we should be clear, there is a traditional left doctrine on this, which we should adhere to. Seems to have been sidetracked. But let's remember, what matters in politics is constant activism. Every couple of years, an event comes up called an election, which you have to take 15 minutes off and decide, is it worth pushing a lever? And sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. If it's worth it, you push the lever and then you go back to work. That's the left doctrine. There's also an official doctrine that tells you the only thing you should think about is elections. Concentrate on that, devote all your attention to that. Once you've pushed your lever, go home, and 4 years from now, we'll ask you to come and push the lever again. That's the official doctrine. We should keep to the traditional doctrine. I should mention that there's a new doctrine that showed up in the last couple of years. I'd never heard of it before. It's now so popular, it's even used by its initials, LEV, LEV, lesser evil voting. I don't know what that is. That's never been on the agenda before, certainly not on the left. You don't vote if it's not worth it. You vote for a Republican when there used to be a party, then it's just not an issue. But that's displaced the left doctrine. So there's an enormous amount of focus and discussion and debate on the left about the lesser evil doctrine, which in fact was invented by the people who are attacking it. There's never been such a doctrine before. There is a doctrine that says every once in a while it's worth taking a couple of minutes and deciding if there's a significant distinction between the candidates and vote against the worst one, then go back to work. Now that's the left doctrine, and we should keep to that. And in this case, for those 15 minutes, it's a very simple choice. Don't like either of them, but there's great, enormous differences. In fact, differences so great that the fate of human survival depends on them.
I remember when Obama was running the first time, and there was a lot of enthusiasm for him. I remember you saying that we should elect Obama, but without illusions. And the without illusions part spoke to the need, you argued, for sustained activism to pressure Obama. And that didn't happen. Pretty much Obama won, and he told his movement to go home. And it wasn't really revived until, I don't know, you could argue with the Occupy movement. And I guess what I want, hearing you speak about the possibilities to influence a potential Biden administration in a positive direction, I suppose one really positive thing on that front is that Biden is not Obama. He's not nearly as smooth, not nearly as convincing an actor, and not nearly as demobilizing to people, because Obama was very good at making people think that he was doing something with lofty rhetoric while really carrying on with the same policy. So I'm wondering if you see the fact that Biden is just so much less convincing and has a lot of flaws. He's obviously slowed down a bit with age, whether you see that as a positive for the ability to send his administration in a positive direction with sustained activism.
It's not only a prediction, it's happened. Take a look at the party program. It's very heavily influenced by the Sanders movement and the general activism of the last couple of years. Compare the program with any preceding one. I think you're right. Obama was a very smooth operator. In fact, as you probably recall, right after the 2008 election, shortly after it, there was a meeting of the annual meeting of the Professional Association of Advertisers. They give an award every year to the greatest marketing campaign of the year. Obama won it overwhelmingly, way ahead of amateurs like Apple and Google and those. They could see what's happening. So it was a great marketing campaign, hope and change and all that stuff. The illusions lasted for maybe 2 years until the bailout. I think the crushing blow, which led all the way to Trump, was the bailout after the housing collapse and financial crisis. Congress passed legislation with saying, okay, bail out the perpetrators, because you could argue whether it was right or wrong, but they decided on that. So bail out those who caused the crisis, but give aid and support to the victims, to the people who lost their homes on foreclosures and so on. Obama fulfilled the first part completely, totally forgot about the second part. In fact, in 2010, there was an election in Massachusetts. Ted Kennedy died. They have a by-election. Massachusetts is a very liberal state. The Democratic candidate, a liberal candidate, lost. One of the reasons was that even union voters didn't want to vote for the Democrats. They felt they'd been screwed, and the Republican won. And we see now that the pressure, popular pressure following the left doctrine, constant popular pressure, has shifted the party to the left. And if it continues, assuming that Biden wins, if it continues, they can keep his feet to the fire. It can. We've seen it happen, even with Republicans, certainly here. But it's got to continue. We have to go back to the traditional left doctrine. Politics is activism. Occasionally there's a brief break, to decide whether to take off a couple of minutes and vote. Then you go back to work. That's the right doctrine.
Well, could that even begin right now with Biden in terms of, I know that Bernie has endorsed Biden, as he said he would do with whoever won the primary, but could Bernie's movement, I mean, given that it's relatively early, it's May, could Bernie's movement be organized in a way that withholds the endorsement of many people unless Biden actually commits explicitly to progressive policies such as Medicare for all?
Well, that's a tactic that's proposed, but it's kind of meaningless. And first of all, if Biden's advisors are bothering to think, they know it's empty. At least if the people who are advocating this are serious and care about the country, they're going to vote for Biden anyway. Because there's a very simple point that a lot of people don't seem to see, but very simple. If you take a vote away from Biden, it amounts to the same thing as adding a vote to Trump. So if you decide, I'm not going to vote for Biden, that's the same as if, John Doe comes out of the woodwork and says, okay, I'm going to vote for Trump. Changes it by, in fact, to think it through, it's actually 2 votes for Trump if you don't do it, but let's not go into the details. It's essentially voting for Trump. So if the threat is at all meaningful, if people mean it, they're going to vote for Trump anyway, for Biden anyway. So why pay attention? If they don't mean it, it's not worth talking to them. There are people who are willing to see the country destroyed because they didn't get what they wanted. So it's just not a useful tactic. It's not going to affect the party program. What will affect the party program is what has been affecting it all along, namely the constant activism. So keep demanding, we want this on the program, we want this. Empty threats don't help that, they just diminish it. The idea that sometimes proposed is that, well, this will make the Democratic Party pay attention to us. So 4 years from now, maybe they'll be different. And first of all, it's not going to happen. Secondly, the time scale is all wrong. 4 more years of Trump and we're in deep trouble. So we got to get rid of this malignancy now. We know how to do it. Take off a couple minutes in November, push the lever. And meanwhile, keep the pressure on, and keep the pressure on afterwards. That's the tactic that works. We've seen it work. It's working right now.
If Biden were elected, I could easily see him returning to the Iran deal that his administration signed. When it comes to another place that is being subjected to murderous U.S. sanctions right now, Venezuela, Biden has pretty much endorsed Trump's policy of regime change and sanctions, although he may be open to some limited relief during the coronavirus crisis. Do you think that a country like Venezuela could hang on if these sanctions continue?
I think they're in, we don't know. They might be able to survive somehow. The thing that's happening to them, and that's the collapse of the oil price. Okay. Whether they can hold out, I don't know. But on this issue, instead of conjecturing about what might happen, we should ask what we can do. I think all the sanctions are, almost all of them are totally illegitimate. And we should be working on getting them eliminated. That's the thing to be doing. We should be protesting loudly, making the point, educating, organizing to get, it won't happen with Trump, but to get, if Biden gets elected, to get him to eliminate all the sanctions. That goes way back to the sanctions on Cuba. Right now, the United States has had cruel, brutal sanctions on Cuba almost as when it became independent, shortly after. It was also combined with a massive terrorist campaign. The whole world is opposed to those sanctions. They come up every year in the United Nations General Assembly. The United States is alone in opposing them. Israel joins the United States, but they have to. So it's basically the United States against the world, as it is on issue after issue. And what activists should be doing is working to educate, organize, carry out actions to get rid of the whole sanctions regime. And that's what you do. And it can be done.